All right. Hello, Detroit. You are watching Beauty and the D live, streaming on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and other top social media platforms. So please remember to like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Also remember that you can call in and ask questions during this live podcast at 313-355-6018. So today we have another fabulous guest, as we do every single Saturday here, and I'm going to read her bio and just thank her for being here real quick. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here.
I'm honored to have you.
Tremendous opportunity. Thank you.
So I want to let our guests and audience and listeners know who you are. So I'm going to read your bio and we'll just interview from off of that.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So again, we have Miss Florice R. Neville Ewell. She is an attorney and counselor, as well as a tenured law professor. Her education consists of a bachelor's degree from Yale College, where she graduated cum laude. She also has her JD law degree from Yale. Her bar licenses are in Illinois as well as Michigan. And now I'm going to read her professional background. Professor Neville Ewell is a tenured law professor who currently teaches property and related subjects at Cooley Law School. Through her classes designed to make students practice ready, students not only learn substantive law, but also have an opportunity to enhance their skills by receiving exclusive access to her renowned tools, templates, and sample documents materials. Prior to becoming an academic professor, Neville Ewell practiced law in the private and public sectors. Immediately after clerking for the Honorable Julian A. Cook Jr. in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan, she was an associate at Sidley Austin LLP in Chicago, Illinois, and Honickman, am I pronouncing that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
LLP in Detroit, Michigan. Thereafter, in the public sector, she was general counsel for the Detroit Housing Commission and chief of contracts for the city of Detroit. Appointed by former Governor Jennifer Granholm, she was also on the board of the Michigan State Housing Authority, MISTA, and became chair of the board. Through her public and private practice experiences, Professor Neville Ewell has expertise in resolving issues related to commercial contracts, residential, commercial financing, commercial municipal, residential property matters, housing development generally, and affordable housing in particular. Often, because of her training and experience, municipalities, churches, and developers employ her as outside counsel to resolve intricate matters. In regards to pro bono projects promoting housing literacy, since 1985, in conjunction with clerking, practicing law, and teaching, Professor Neville Ewell has simultaneously been dedicated to educating the public about legal issues. In 1985, she hosted an Ask the Lawyer program produced in Macomb County, Michigan. Thereafter, she hosted a similar weekly program on WVON, a talk radio station in Chicago, her hometown. Since that time, in response to the housing and mortgage crisis, to be part of a holistic effort to reverse economic disparities, Professor Neville Ewell has empowered the public with information through a number of platforms, namely via the production and presentation of weekly radio segments, by being a special columnist and writing monthly articles for the Michigan Chronicle and the former Charter One as its ghostwriter. Through providing educational seminars to adults and youth as the founder of the 10 Commandments of Real Estate Law Society, also known as 10 Core Law Society, and as the host of the Housing Gap podcast, which she hopes to resume soon. Although she has received a number of awards and acknowledgments, Professor Neville Ewell is particularly humbled by having won the Wade H. McCree Award for the Advancement of Social Justice, awarded by the Eastern District of Michigan Federal Bar Association. Being recognized nationally as Outstanding Woman Lawyer / Hidden Figure Impact, nominee by the National Bar Association Women Lawyers Division, being given an award by Michigan Lawyers Weekly as part of the 2021 class of Women in Law, and for having been anonymously vetted to be a fellow for the American Bar Association, which is limited, by the way, to only 1% of the licensed attorneys in this country. ABF Fellows are a global honorary society of attorneys, judges, law faculty, and legal scholars whose public and private careers have demonstrated outstanding dedication to the highest principles in the legal profession. Again, I want to say thank you so much for being
who are
here.
you talking about? Thank you so
beautiful
much.
black queen. You.
Much. Thank you.
So, I didn't realize until I had read your bio that you're not even from Michigan. You're from Illinois.
That's right. I'm a native Chicago.
Well, we love the Chi. I mean, that's right up the street from
That's
here.
right.
There's so many similarities between the two.
There you go.
We're in the
There you
Midwest.
go. I fell in love while I was clerking.
Okay.
And my husband ultimately became the gentleman that I fell in love with, Ed Ewell, now a judge. We kept dating because I went back to Chicago. I had accepted the offer at Sidley,
Okay.
and I had to go back. I had to fulfill my responsibilities after my clerkship. And we kept dating and ultimately decided that Detroit was the best place for both of us.
All right.
And so many moons later, here we are.
What a beautiful love story.
Yes. it
It's
is.
a beautiful love story. So that quick story right there demonstrates your loyalty to this profession
That's right.
and fulfilling your obligations.
That's right.
And
Absolutely.
then you're love and dedicated to your boo, your hubby.
That's it. That's it. We had to make a decision that, would ultimately help us figure out what was better for both of us.
Okay.
And of course, any marriage is a partnership. And ultimately, we made that decision. And it's just been a phenomenal life.
I want to talk about all of your many accomplishments, but before I get there, and I hope I'm not being too personal, but I hope you can speak to me and other professional black women who may have a hard time with balancing, being so dedicated to our careers and then also being dedicated to the love of our lives. So
That's right.
let's talk
That's
about
right.
because that is an extreme balance.
Well, it's interesting. My husband knew who he married. And I mention that because often in relationships we might conceal or hold back or not really disclose who we are. But I was raised by a woman who was just authentic. She didn't pull any punches. She told you what she felt. And my dad died when I was 3 years old.
Oh,
So I was the youngest of 6 children.
wow.
In inner city Chicago. And we were just raised to do 3 things. Get an excellent education, right? Ultimately, make sure that you take whatever you learn back to your community,
Okay.
right? And ultimately, what did that mean? But doing a lot of pro bono, a lot of work to help the community.
Yes.
And so, given that, I needed to make sure when, Ed and I started dating that he understood that that's who I was.
So you were very transparent.
Very transparent.
From the
And
beginning.
ultimately, even while I was clerking, typically you don't do anything else while you're clerking for a federal judge because you're so busy helping that judge. There are a lot of cases in the federal system. But I asked my judge if I could do a program, even then, just out of law school, called Ask the Lawyer.
Okay. You
And
came up with that on your own.
I came up with that because, you see, in our system, we've got incongruity. On the one hand, we have rules and laws and responsibilities, but we don't have a set mechanism for making sure that people know what those rules and laws are.
Yep.
And I've always felt we need to be honest and recognize everyone's not going to law school. So how can we make sure that the ordinary Joe or Josephine is clear about what their responsibilities are?
So how do we, exactly, that's a good point. How do you know how to adhere to the law if
That's
you
right.
don't know
if you're unaware?
if you don't
And
know what the
even
rules are?
worse, if you don't even know what you don't know.
That part.
I mean, that is the ultimate dilemma. And so I always thought that was, just incongruous, that it just wasn't fair. And so I thought, well, what better way than to try and do programming so that you can make sure that you address some of those essential things that people need to know. And so at that point, Macomb
How did you have
County,
time to do the clerking and ask the lawyer?
Because this is so important. And I've done it throughout my life.
Okay.
And even with 2 children who were very busy, I would drag them along, and they in turn are of like mind. They see their parents either through our church or through pro bono activities. Because to whom much is given, much is expected and required. And to me, I don't judge what people do or don't do. I just try and do what I can do. And then I'm sure that I've tried to do all that I was supposed to do. Because I have been so blessed with all the opportunities and experiences and exposure that I've had. And I feel like it is my obligation, right? I have no choice. And so I've always made sure, again, from the time I got out of law school, and the judge said, Florice, go ahead. Obviously, don't address anything that we're dealing with in court. And when I got to Chicago, same thing. At Sidley Austin, a huge global law firm, I talked to the partner who managed our group, and he said, absolutely, just make sure you don't address anything that we're discussing.
Okay.
So I had judges on. I even had the Honorable Harold Washington on, which was fabulous right before he passed. So it was just an incredible opportunity for me to give back to the community by exposing them and sharing with them information. It's very important.
So it's safe to say that you've raised your children on those same 3 principles that you were brought up on: getting a good education, giving back to the community. What was the third one?
And then doing actual pro bono work. They're sort of connected. So that you realize that the education that you get is not just for you. You know, certainly we use this education to become prominent lawyers, doctors, insurance agents, whatever it is, no doubt, because we need to earn a living. But I have always believed that that educational opportunity, because everyone can't get it, that we have a responsibility to reach back. And I ran track, not that good, because Yale didn't have the best athletes, but I ran track. I was on relay teams. And so
that made you competitive.
Well, the metaphor, but the metaphor of, you know, passing that baton back is exactly what I believe we're supposed to do. And that's what we told our children. You know, you have an obligation to do your very best, to use the gifts that God has given you to in turn help somebody else.
Absolutely. But many of us don't do that. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. As a matter of fact, I'm so glad that you did a whole section about pro bono.
Yes.
And I say that because I wouldn't use the word ridicule, but a lot of times, you know, I work with a lot of nonprofits. I sit on a lot of boards, and it's free. You know what I mean? I'm giving my time back to my community. And people always kind of mention to me, why are you always, you know, and I feel like, you know, the money will come if you're just consistent and you're good at what you do. But I do have a passion for serving. You know, so I'm just so glad that.
Well, you have a passion, and let me just say that you did a phenomenal job for our student CEOs. I know you'll get to that eventually, but now that you're mentioning it, I hope to say it several times. You know, you came into that classroom for the students that we're teaching and trying to help them prepare to be homeowners, and shared years of experience. How else would they have known about all different types of insurance and sort of the secrets behind insurance?
Yes, the secrets.
How else do we know that? But by bringing in an expert, a professional, a consummate professional. And so, you know, they spoke about that at the very end. We just wrapped the program last week. And one young woman wrote a poem that said, you know, we had outstanding mentors.
I would love to hear that.
Outstanding professionals.
Yes.
So we're thinking about having that, putting it, you know, on Twitter, putting it on TikTok. Because to have a young person say it, it was sort of a rhyme rap. And she basically said, I'm ready. And that's what we're trying to do.
Practice ready.
Practice ready.
Yes.
So thank you. Let me just say it publicly on your show. You just did a phenomenal job.
I appreciate that.
And why shouldn't we? Because if we don't do it, who will?
And so many of us don't find out about the importance or the secrets of insurance until you have a claim, until it's too late.
Or the secrets of anything.
Yeah.
And these are just in-depth things that people need to understand. They're really not secrets. But why not find the best in every category? And that's what 10 Core is trying to do, as you referenced in my bio. Since 2010, you see, we have been committed to this, and that started right after the financial pandemic. See, this country's had a series of pandemics, and that was the one concerning foreclosures. And I was speaking to AARP folks and, NAACP, just all around, trying to help people understand how they needed to approach this. And ultimately, as professors, the students know what we're doing and they post it. And so I had students from the diaspora, Latinos and folks from all backgrounds saying, well, Professor, we're all experiencing this. We want to be involved. Is there anything that we can do to help you? And ultimately, it turned into the 10 Commandments of Real Estate Law Society.
Wow.
And we did programming about that topic in the Arab community. In every community reflected in the law school. We did programming to talk about that pandemic. And then ultimately it morphed into, we had, people from Selfridge Air Force Base come and say, say to us, so we did some work for veterans. Went there and educated them. And even though they have fabulous JAG lawyers, we approached it from a housing literacy perspective, as we often say. We're not giving financial literacy, but housing literacy. We're trying to coin that phrase because we're specifically focused on that information that you need. So from the time I started right after law school, I was doing programming on a variety of subjects. But then gradually, after 10 Core came into existence, the students said, no, Professor, we have issues in all of our communities. And often it was powerful because we'd have one slide with English, one slide with Spanish or Arabic. And that's when I thought, this is something that we need to share. And so it's been difficult to do what I want to do with 10 Core, which is to have it nationally and ultimately internationally. But at the end of the day, trying to do the best I can.
What's one milestone at a time, Ms. Maurice? One milestone at a time.
That's right.
So I have to ask this. Why law? So the 3 principles that you were raised on to get a great education, what made you say law is the education that I'm going to go in? To
be honest, there were a few things. Number one, in our household growing up, every Sunday we had a very formal dinner, sitting around the table, arguing, but arguing as lawyers argue. I say all that to say we still, today, when we all get together as a family, stand by for a healthy discussion. Because when you say argument to most people, they think, oh my goodness, were they fighting? No, we believe in the healthy engagement of the exchange of ideas.
And from different perspectives.
And I grew up with that. And quite frankly, my poor children also grew up with that. And I have a funny story about that. But our dad was a lawyer and died very early, like I said, when I was 3 years old. And as a result, I grew up being very vocal, very argumentative, but in a positive way, just in terms of being willing to express my opinion. And I knew that my dad had some unfinished business. And by that, I mean my older brother and I decided to join the profession. He's on the Supreme Court in Illinois. And he ultimately was named after my dad. So the two of us took those batons. That's right. And just decided there was more work to be done.
That's awesome.
And that's why we're doing it. And so I, probably knew that when I was in middle school. I started talking about it. My mother knew it. I was trying to do everything that I could to prepare toward that end. And here it is, many moons later.
Thank you for sharing that. So that helped us to get a broader picture of, of you and where it all began.
It all began. And see, ultimately in Chicago at that point, there were very few black lawyers.
Attorneys, okay.
And they weren't making big money. Many of them had to work at the post office, or they had to get other jobs because they couldn't get employed, because
Really?
they couldn't get into the traditional law firms, or often even into public opportunities. So that was the case for my dad with these 6 children. It was a very difficult life.
For him, so that's why he said there's more work to be done.
There's more work to be done.
Gotcha.
And so fortunately, my mom was getting ready to go back to work right after she, had me, and she taught in Joliet, Illinois, and we were sort of the weird family. Often people live in the suburbs and they drive to the city. We lived in the heart of the city, and it's now known as Bronzeville, but then it was the hood. And so, notwithstanding the fact that my dad was a lawyer, that didn't matter. He was committed to the community. We lived in the community. My mother stayed in that same Greystone that we have today.
Wow.
And so, she went to work and was driving, 45 minutes outside of the city, but it was a very poor community. And I would see my mother go and buy clothing and take extra food because some of those children didn't have anything. They were poor. And so early on, between that and then they had an organization for the wives of the black lawyers, and they would do programming. And so as a result, what did I do when I got out? But I was in the Links chapter here until it became so difficult for me because I was doing so many outside activities. And then the school has me commuting to Tampa, Florida to teach.
Oh, wow.
So it was, very difficult to manage being part of that. But any organization that's trying to help people is an organization that I want to be a part of. And ultimately, through 10 Core, I've had to commit there because that's taking so much time, but we think we're doing some wonderful work.
You are doing some wonderful work.
We hope so.
We need to get you over at NARAB. I just have to throw that in there.
Yes.
We absolutely do. So can you talk to us about clerking? What does clerking exactly consist of?
Okay, well, to the extent that there are 2 separate systems, as we know. We've got the federal judges and we have the state judges. At the federal level, of course, there are 3 levels. You have the district court, the court of appeals, and the ultimate, the Supreme Court. At the state level, you have the state district judges, the court of appeals, and we have our own Supreme Court. Well, I was in the federal court, and one of the reasons why I didn't try and apply in Chicago, because when I applied, Detroit had the highest number of black federal judges in the country.
Really?
And who better to learn from than Anna Diggs Taylor, Julian Cook, Damon Keith? I mean, we had some powerhouses here who were writing opinions that were changing the world.
In the country?
In the country.
I'm sorry, I just was stuck on that.
That's right, and I get chills when I think about it.
Yeah, me too.
But many of us, you see, came from those Ivy League experiences because we wanted to now be trained by those who had achieved that opportunity. And initially, you see, I wanted to be a litigator. And thought, wow, that's really what I must do. I had engaged in all sorts of extracurricular activities in law school, and so I applied. And it's not easy to do because you have thousands of people applying from all of the law schools. But I was blessed and highly favored to have done, pretty well in law school. I was in a pretty good law school, and so as a result, I got the opportunity.
You did great in law school.
And once you're there, well, you never, I never focus on that as much as, again, what can I do with what I got? And
but we do want to celebrate you for what you have and the work that you put in to get it. Like Yale, let's even talk about you're an African American woman who graduated top of your class from Yale. How did you know that that's where you wanted to end up? Like when you're talking and inspiring others.
Yes.
How did you know?
Well, I have to go back to my mother. My mother believed so intensely in the power of prayer and faith. And if I explained how I got to Yale, you wouldn't believe it. I spoke French from the time I was in middle school. And ultimately, said to my mother in high school, I would love to go to France with this program.
In middle school?
No, by this time I was in high school.
Okay.
But I had started it in sixth grade.
Mm-hmm.
So in high school, I continued to take French and loved it and didn't even know why, but I wanted to go to this program. It was called the Experiment in International Living. Well, of course, I was in a private school, high school by that time, got scholarships, then wanted to go on this very expensive program. Somehow we managed to do it. I don't know how. And I went over there and basically became fluent. That's only relevant because when I came back to apply for college, I asked to interview in French. So imagine me making this specific request, right? And then having someone come from the Gold Coast, undoubtedly in Chicago, to interview me in the hood in French. That alone, I'm sure, made the admissions committee think, well, how in the world did this happen?
Right.
So I can only attribute it to God ordering my steps because I got in and did well, and I was just blessed because I had an excellent high school education. And, you know, throughout Detroit Public Schools, Chicago Public Schools, and ultimately got into the law school, which was rare because they don't accept a lot. Most people go to Harvard or one of the other schools, but I really loved Yale, was able to stay, and had some phenomenal training. I just did.
Wow.
And so, again, my mother always said, you know, pray your way through it, through all things. You know, you can get it done. You know, God will order your steps. That's what I've told to our children. That's what my husband also believes. And I knew he was the man of my dreams because he is also grounded. We simply believe that through God, all things are possible that you're supposed to do. Now, if you're not supposed to do it, it gets delayed or it doesn't get done. But we accept that too. And so that's what I've tried to frankly share with my law students. I don't talk to them about God because we all have different denominations and the like. But at the core of my attempt, you see, to encourage them, to make sure that they're the best lawyers that they can be. Because I say, you're my academic children. I've got to make sure you're ready because you're a reflection of me.
Absolutely. So is that how you ended up with working with the global law firm that you worked for? Is it because of the French?
No. So when you get in law school, you have an opportunity to apply for summer opportunities. And, you know, by going to Yale, hands down, it just created a world of opportunity.
Absolutely.
It just did.
Especially top of your class.
You know, it just created a world of opportunities. And there were only, I believe, maybe 8 black folks in my class.
I wanted to ask you that.
And we had a class of about 152, something like that.
Wow.
So every summer after our first and second years, you see, we had an opportunity to clerk. And to go and work in a firm. And Sidley and Austin had offices in California, and I was thinking about moving to California. So I clerked there, but I also love, of course, my hometown. So I wanted to work with a Chicago firm that had multiple offices. And so I worked there, and of course, President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama also worked there because at the time the firm was known for being progressive, believed in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now I'm an alum, but they're still doing programming on those things. So the firm was well known. We thought that we could, shall I say, be exposed again to the brightest minds. And ultimately, that's what it's all about when you're in training. And as a lawyer, you're always in training. So you try to surround yourself or to do those things that'll keep you sharp. It's just that simple.
Because the law is always changing and you have to stay ahead of that, right?
That's right. And try and contribute to that change. That's where I sit now. I'm trying to change specifically as it relates to 10 Core, trying to change our housing policy across the country. And so at the end of the day, You start out in training, and that's what the clerkship was about, trying to expose yourself to the brightest minds, trying to expose yourself to judges who were making a difference. And then from there, trying to do the best work for your clients, which I still try to do, because I try to keep my knives sharp by working, but teaching is my first priority. But I also believe in trying to engage as a practitioner.
Gotcha. So we have to give our shout out. You're watching Beauty and the D live. We're streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and other top social media platforms. So please like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. And today we have the fabulous, intelligent Miss Florice Neville-Ewell. And if you want to give us a call in and ask her any questions, you can do so at 313-355-6018. Again, thank you so much for being here. So I want to get to, because I know it's your passion to talk about 10 core, but I just have a few more questions about you. And, because I hope this is also not just enlightening someone on who you are, but maybe even inspiring them, because you've put in a lot of work. Free work, you've put in a lot of training, you've gotten your education, and you didn't just get the education, you had to go the extra mile, so I hope that it's definitely inspiring me to continue on and go as far as I can go in my endeavors. So your French, do you use your French at all today?
Actually, to be honest, I should have also taken Spanish, because with commuting and teaching in Tampa, now I wish I could speak Spanish, and that was a grave error. But since I was so far along in French, I just didn't want to start all over again. But I wish that I had, because Spanish would actually be more practical. But do I speak French at every opportunity? Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. I will occasionally listen to the Canadian stations or any French station wherever I am, because the whole thing about languages, of course, is that you have to think in the language. So when that part of my hard drive and my brain gets engaged, I basically open the French file, and then instead of saying a door, I say la porte. So everything gets converted in your mind. And once you learn the language and begin to think in the language, it's fairly easy to go back to it. And it's just like if you're talking and you forget what a word is, you may say, qu'est-ce que c'est, what's that? But when I was in France, I learned from, we had already taken lots of classes, but we also spent 3 weeks with a French family. And they had 2 little children. And who better to learn a language
from children
than from children?
Yeah.
So I would walk around the house with them and say, qu'est-ce que c'est, which is, what is that? And they were teaching me, and I would have conversations with them. And then my French parents, as they call them, would have all of these little gatherings, little dinner parties and stuff like that. I would go to bed exhausted because my brain was, trying to make this adjustment. But by the time I left, it just came naturally. So it was a powerful thing. And like I said, when I came back and interviewed, the person who interviewed me was just in awe.
I know. They were in the middle of Chicago.
Right. Speaking French, but I love the language. It's a beautiful language. So,
So we have that in common. I was a foreign exchange student in Pascuero, Michoacan, Mexico. I studied Spanish, but then I went to a HBCU, Wilberforce University. You know what they say, you don't use it, you lose it. And that's what happened. I wish, but I'm going to instill that in my daughter. She wants to take it next year. But the experience that I had was the culture, the food, and I lived with the family as well. In the middle of the house, there was no roof because they believed in letting the sun, letting God in, So it was I got to live with them. I was there for a semester. I lived with them. We also spent some time in a camp where we got to kind of hang out and learn the culture with the locals even more. But it is a wonderful experience. And I'm from the number streets is what they call it, city of Detroit. And having that experience is just not too many people get to say that they've had that opportunity.
And it changes your whole perspective.
It does.
On, your living circumstances, the world, what you can do, and the fact that we're all people. See,
all people.
You know, we come from different backgrounds, cultures, but at the end of the day, we're just all people.
Absolutely. We are all just people. So, 10 core.
Yes.
Let's talk about the 10 commandments of
real estate.
Right? Of real estate. Yes. I should never forget that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, in 2010, I already said, you know, we started it to make sure that adults had information. But ultimately, I was visiting at the University of Detroit Law School and decided that because HUD was celebrating its 50th anniversary, that we should do a symposium.
Okay.
And a symposium, of course, results in sort of an academic arrangement where you bring in all of these academics and practitioners, and ultimately, the name of the symposium was HUD's Past, Present, and Future. So everybody was on under one of those umbrellas.
Past, present, or future.
Past, present, or future of HUD. And at the same time, as is always the case, we had programming for the public. They were invited to the symposium, but we also had programming dedicated to educate them. So we always and still do have programming that's designed to keep them up to date or educate them about programming. Well, I spoke under the HUD Future umbrella. And in connection with that, said, as my colleagues just told us, HUD during the next 50 years needs to reconsider exactly how its housing policy is operating. Specifically, if we look at people in public housing, there's nothing wrong with public housing. I'm sure most relatives that we have at some point have gone through public housing because it was designed so that we wouldn't have the homeless, so that we wouldn't have people who were unhoused. So ultimately, I said, but notwithstanding that, it was not supposed to be permanent housing. Namely, it was not supposed to be housing where we'd have generations living, ultimately making them, in some respects, impoverished by being in housing. I said, instead, it was supposed to be bridge housing. If you had a problem, you went into public housing and then ultimately came back out to then revisit, you know, living in the market.
But not to make it a way of life.
But not to make it a way of life. And again, there's nothing wrong with living in public housing.
Absolutely.
But if we have families who are there permanently, and if we don't see them having an opportunity to experience what the country calls the American dream of home ownership, I said, shame on us. Now, HUD, of course, has the first-time home buyer program.
They do.
And that is designed, and we know we can't mention that without mentioning Dina, right? Because she is the queen of home ownership opportunities through that, you know, HUD certified counseling programming. But is it too late? And I ultimately asked, are we waiting too late to potentially expose people to the concept of owning their own, or perhaps becoming realtors? And the American dream is premised on the notion that at some point you might be able to use that as a tool to build wealth. And if you are resigned to, and again, there's nothing wrong with it, but if that is where you stop, have we somehow failed people? Because no doubt they can ultimately participate in that, but why not take a step back? And so basically, we argued, and our board of directors had talked about it, why don't we start educating youth? Why don't we start earlier? Why don't we commit ourselves to saying everybody, in order to dream, needs to be aware of what that dream requires?
A lot of cultures do that. They instill in their children very young.
Very young. And so I said, you know, how can you dream about something that you never witnessed?
Wow.
How can you see an opportunity and envision how you're going to get there if you've never seen it? And so I was very adamant about saying, we got to do better. And why not try and figure out how we can create that opportunity? So, make a long story short, while 10 Core started by educating adults. And that was what we were dedicated to given the financial crisis. In 2018, after that, with all of that criticism to HUD, HUD said, guess what? We heard you, so what you gonna do? And it resulted in us doing programming in Inkster Public Housing Projects. And there we started the programming for middle school students and beyond, but discovered that was too early because we do math and our student CEOs, as you witnessed, are doing everything as it relates to pretending like they're buying their first houses. So from there, we went to River Rouge High School. So we did a 1 week day camp, and then ultimately River Rouge High School, and then most recently, where you were there to help us, we were at Triumph Church. And so we had 16 to 24-year-olds. And I'm telling you, to see in their eyes the information and their response to the information that we give them, starting with landlord tenant and then progressing to becoming a homeowner, meeting all of the professionals like yourself who came in and told them what to do. But not only are people talking, they are getting the documents. We're walking them through documents. So just as you said in my bio, for my law students, they get documents. For our student CEOs, they get documents. And when we closed, that mock closing for our student CEOs, we gave them packets like you get from title companies, you see. And then ultimately had them signing deeds just so they can feel the impact of owning something that you're now selling to somebody else. I mean, again, the 10 core experience is designed to reboot and extend the housing policy. So that by the time they get to DINA and other HUD certified, they're ready. We don't have to wait for them to figure out, how do I get my credit score right? What do I need to do? No, we want to prepare youth and young adults across the country.
And that is the perfect, in my opinion, age category, because you're catching them when they're in that midway to high school, when they're thinking about college, thinking about careers, and then up to 24, around the time where they're coming into themselves, into the career, and even prior to that as freshmen in college, because I was a freshman in college and I got hit with credit cards and offers and been there, done that, had to,
we all
did. So it's a perfect age right there, to get their mind in that state of building wealth via home ownership.
That's right.
That's why it's the American dream.
That's right.
And that's why maybe we were purposely, given these public housing opportunities to live into, so that we don't think about the American dream. And if we're not thinking about the American dream, then we're not achieving the American dream. So,
well, let me rewrite that. Notwithstanding the fact, or even if we are in the public housing sector, we've got poor whites, poor blacks, poor Hispanics. So we've got groups of folk who are in those sectors. But that's exactly the point. I don't care where you are. Everybody deserves to dream. And that's what 10 Core is going to make sure that we do. Everybody needs that information. Now, what you do with it, this is a free country. But everybody should have that opportunity and the tools. You see, so don't just tell me about the American dream. Tell me how I get there. And the best story that I can tell you is we had 2 student CEOs, because that's what we call them. These are CEOs in the classroom. We don't call them kids or students. We are trying to convert their mindsets. But we had a set of twins. And one of the twins was, in our hypothetical world, an aeronautical engineer, and made $350,000 a year. His twin brother was a barber, and of course barbers make a lot of money, but according to our source it says $65,000 a year. When we took them on the home tour, so that they could see the different neighborhoods and see how much house they could afford, the brother who was the barber said, there is no way I'm dropping out of school, There is no way you're going to make more money than me. There is no way you're going to be able to buy that house that I cannot buy. They had the perfect exchanges.
Yes, two brothers.
Two brothers. Because we didn't have to explain the significance. We said, you are choosing your path right now.
Mm-hmm.
And according to one of the fabulous teachers at River Rouge High School, and then, we had a couple of folks at River Rouge who, just really, really helped us, including the superintendent, Dr. Coleman, Mr. Connor, who was the economics teacher. I mean, these are men committed, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are men who are committed to making sure that our young people go to another level.
Another level.
That's right.
And so do you believe that the student CEOs are taking this information home to their families as well?
I know they are.
Okay.
Because the parents came to the last program.
Okay.
And it's sort of like, looking at a smorgasbord, and they're like, we want some of that too.
Uh-huh.
And so at the end of the day, it's a 40-hour program, you see. So it really is a watered-down version of what law students are getting. It really is.
As well as first-time home buyers.
That's right. Well, they're almost ready to go.
Uh-huh.
We're giving them the foundation.
Yeah.
The foundation with the information that they need to understand the real estate process.
Mm-hmm.
See, with 40 hours, we have time to do that. The HUD Certified Counseling Program, we aren't HUD Certified Counselors, but we are preparing people for that.
Okay.
So by the time they get there, all the money that's available, all the opportunities, they'll be ready to go because they will have understood what the process is and know that that's one of their due diligence items.
Got you. So how many student CEOs do you think you have helped throughout TNCOR?
Well, right now it's probably a little over 100.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But our dream is to get into every classroom that we can.
Okay.
So that we're talking about thousands, then tens of thousands. Because you see, ultimately, it's a political thing to get into, these various and sundry jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go and talk to the state of Michigan about changing the curriculum? So we really don't have time for that.
Yeah.
And that route, I'm not so sure is the greatest one to go. But Michigan does have a financial literacy mandate.
Okay.
And ultimately what we are doing, we call housing literacy, which is more extensive.
Okay.
And so what we're trying to do is to partner with junior colleges or community colleges.
Perfect.
So that it can be part of the dual degree.
Yes.
Dual degree program. And ultimately through that dual degree, they can, get credit for it because we really believe that this information is worthy of credit. And then in turn, they can, get a trade or continue to get their BA, but they'll be on a path.
Yeah.
And so, we're trying to figure out how we can best expand this.
Do you need any help? We have like 2 minutes. This time goes by so fast.
It does.
Do you need any help with the organization?
Absolutely.
Okay.
10corelawsociety.org. 10corelawsociety.org. And of course, I have to say that, we have like a self-sufficiency model.
Okay.
And I want to share the sort of thread that takes us to our ancestors that we're trying to hold on the baton to, right after emancipation. Our ancestors got those shotgun houses. And ancestors from every ethnic group have their story, but our story as African Americans are those shotgun houses. They may have had 2, 3, 4 families living in those houses. And then ultimately a family would move out and they would continue until everybody got it. But with 1/1,000,000th of the education that we have, they understood we have to find a way because we know the importance of that land. Having just ended slavery, they got it. We're trying to wake up this generation and generations to follow so that they understand this is the way that we can restore what our ancestors got. So
Legacy.
10 Core is also trying to be self-sufficient. And we have some ideas about the ways in which we can sell items and the like. And so I would just love for people to donate or to stand by as we try and find ways to, make us self-sufficient.
Absolutely.
So we're ultimately going to apply for grants. And I have to give a shout out to Wayne County Treasurer Eric Sabri, another visionary who said, Florice, this is something that will help in generations to come.
Yes.
We don't want people to lose their houses to tax foreclosure
They don't want to take
or mortgage foreclosure. He has done everything.
He has.
And he's on the front end of this. And so ultimately, do we need help? Certainly. Because we want this to grow. If we can get it into the community colleges, I believe that there's funding there to make it part of that curriculum. So we want to take advantage of those opportunities so we can literally have our CEOs understand they're now taking the baton that our ancestors established and didn't have, again, our educational levels. But they knew it.
Or resources.
The land is most important.
What a phenomenal way to end the show. The land is most important. Thank you so much, Miss Florice, for being here today.
Well,
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
It means so much. You've educated me. I'm sure the audience has got a wealth of knowledge from you and a clear picture of who exactly you are.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I have to thank you again, because when professionals step up and the youth see them, they were simultaneously getting an opportunity to see themselves through you. And what better way to encourage them than by saying, and I say to my law students all the time, I'm here and you're seeing a reflection of yourself. And so thank you for stepping up and contributing. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
And we need you soon in the fall.
Oh, yeah. I'm available. Thank you, Detroit, for watching Beauty in the D Live, where we stream on Facebook, YouTube, and other top social media platforms. So, again, remember to like, follow, share, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for watching WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world.